We're on location here in Fourth Fest on the Penn State campus with full coverage of the Firecracker 4K, the parade, and who can forget all the food, fun, and fireworks coming up later in the show. Then Michael Page will take us back to the 1700s, giving us a history lesson on how weather changed America into what it is today. And Jackie Lair is back, who is not only co-hosting the show today, but she has a forecast that you'll want to see, maybe some heat relief coming in to the forecast for next week. All this and more, this special edition of Whether or Not starts right now. Hello and thanks for tuning in to this special edition of Whether or Not from Fourth Fest. I'm your host, Brandon Orr.
And I'm your forecaster, Jackie Lair.
And Jackie, it is very hot here at Fourth Fest. We're seeing temperatures right around 90 degrees. Is there any relief in sight for your forecast?
Yes, there is relief in the forecast, but not until after the weekend. So we're still gonna have to suffer with the heat and even the humidity, even those dew points up in the mid 60s like they were today. So it's gonna have to suffer through it, but stay tuned to my forecast.
That's right, the dew points were up early this morning as well for the Firecracker 4K. People running that. The race started at around 9 o'clock, so you think it would be a little bit cooler out earlier in the morning, but temperatures were already up into the upper 70s. Dew points were in the mid 60s. It felt very sticky, very humid out as well. And get this, look at this, Jackie. This guy here and his buddy were out there with their firefighting suits on. They ran the whole race, start to finish, in full gear just about, and finished just after 30 minutes. You know it's got to be hot under that.
Well, Brandon, we didn't just have the firefighters in the 4K, we also had them in the parade as well, with the fire engines, and we even saw cop cars and even Civil War actors which fired their muskets at us. But the parade actually went through downtown State College, up through the PSU campus, and then finally ended at the Law Building. So it's a pretty long track, but they all got through it, even through the heat and the humidity of the day. Well, after the parade ended, everyone headed over to the east side of campus, right around Beaver Stadium and the Bryce Jordan Center, to get some entertainment and enjoy the festivities.
And there really was a lot of entertainment to be found here at Fourth Fest. There were several stages set up all across the festival for bands to perform. This one here is The Chosen, and a nice group of people came out to see them perform. But bands weren't the only thing. We caught up with Deb, who is one of the organizers for the Pyro Technician fireworks display coming up later on in the show. And she told us a few comments on the weather and how it affects their show.
Actually, yes, in 2004 it poured, and we still got off with a perfect show. So yes, in the rain is not an issue at all.
And yes, Deb was right. We did see about almost a half of an inch of rain back in 2004, but it hasn't rained here in State College on July 4th since 2006.
Well, it's good to know, though, for future years that if it does start to rain a little bit, the show will still go on.
Yes.
But you can't forget the real meaning of 4th of July.
Yes, Brandon, and we even had a 7-foot cake to celebrate America's birthday. That's a big cake.
Yes, it was very big. Just check out this video that we shot during Fourth Fest. It was donated by Giant Foods. They brought the cake out here. Everyone even sung happy birthday for it as well.
Yeah, and even they recited the Declaration of Independence. That was just another activity we had here at Fourth Fest. But all this couldn't have been possible without all the volunteers that generously donated all of their time to this event. And we even caught up with Denise, who said why she volunteers each year. Now, Denise, why did you decide to volunteer today?
I've actually been doing this. I started volunteering for the Fourth Fest before it was called the Fourth Fest back in 1999, and I've been doing it ever since. And we were asked one day if we would mind helping out with the hot dog booth. And we started doing that, and we've been doing it ever since, and it's become a family thing, and it's a great thing to do for the community.
Oh, that's great. Now, what's your favorite part of Fourth Fest?
Well, I have to say, because I'm part of the hot dog booth, I have to say that's the most fun part for me. We grill 4,000 hot dogs that are given away free to the community members, and they give donations if they want to. So for me, that's the fun part. And then, of course, the amazing fireworks show at the end of the night.
And it's not just all of those 600 volunteers, but it takes a cooperation of a lot of people to get an event like this kicked off without a hitch. All the Penn State police, the State College police, including the fire and also security, were out here to make sure everything was just safe. We even caught up with Brian Bittner. Now, he is Penn State's Emergency Management Director, and he had this message to go out to you all, not just for events like Fourth Fest, but also Arts Fest coming up in just a couple weeks.
You have probably 100,000 patrons spread over a vast area, so it'll be the responsibility of the people who are attending as well. Pay attention to the weather. Listen to the radio. Radio announcements will be made. Take a little bit of responsibility for yourself and just be apprised of what's going on around you and make some wise decisions.
That is some very good advice to keep in mind, especially if you have any outdoor plans coming up for 4th of July weekend. Jackie Wool is coming up right now to let us know if you'll need an umbrella or maybe even some sunscreen coming up for the weekend.
Thanks, Brandon. Now, we've had some heat starting off the week, but as we go into the weekend, we're not going to be seeing much in the way of relief, probably not until next week. So with the weekend set up, we do have that jet stream up to our north, so we're going to be seeing nicer conditions as we go into Sunday. But before that, on Saturday, we're going to see a spark of thunderstorms go through our area, as this high will be situated right in the Midwest, so that's going to be sitting there. But thankfully, off to the west, we're going to be seeing some relief from those wildfires out in Colorado, so that's always nice to hear for them out there. But early next week, finally, that high moves off to the west, giving us that clockwise flow, giving us that relief from the north. So cooler air, relief from the heat and the humidity, but that's not until next week. So before that, Friday afternoon, very hot, very sticky. The high will be right around 93 degrees, so probably the best day to be inside rather than outside. We do have some partly cloudy conditions for Friday afternoon, so probably a nice day to go to the pool to get some relief from the heat at least. Then going into Friday overnight, a little bit cooler, 65 degrees, mostly clear skies, so probably a nice night to go out stargazing if you do want to go outside. Then for Saturday, probably the best day for those isolated thunderstorms to pop up. But before that, partly cloudy conditions in the morning, high of 90 degrees, still hot and sticky, and that's why we're going to see those isolated thunderstorms coming in, because with that we had the ingredients of heat and even some different winds aloft, so that wind shear will definitely pump those thunderstorms into our region. Then going into Saturday overnight, a little bit cooler than Sunday, 63 degrees with partly cloudy conditions, so a little bit more in the way of clouds, but still a little bit cooler than Friday night. Going into Sunday, probably the best day of the weekend, as we see some relief with a cold front moving through, giving us a high of 84 degrees and peaks of sunshine, so probably be the best day to be outdoors. Now, thanks again for tuning in, and then up next we have the Weather Whiz Quiz.
Americans across the United States are celebrating the 4th of July with cookouts, parades, and fireworks, and everyone's hoping for good weather. Weather was also very important back during the Revolutionary War, when the foundation of this country started and the 4th of July celebrations began.
The American Revolution started in Massachusetts with the infamous shot heard round the world. For years following the battles of Lexington and Concord, Boston colonists fought British occupation of the city. Finally, in March 1776, the colonists purged the city of British troops, in part because of help from Mother Nature. Colonial General George Washington led the eradication effort, with plans for ousting the Brits starting in December 1775. That's when Washington instructed Henry Knox to bring weaponry from Fort Ticonderoga in New York down to Boston. The trek from upstate New York wasn't an easy one, but lugging dozens of cannons was made easier by a snowy winter in early 1776. Because of the bountiful snow, Knox was able to use sleds to transport much of the military might. He arrived in Boston in late February, and within days, Washington was quietly assembling his new weapons in Dorchester Heights, a strategic high point that overlooks Boston Harbor, which at the time was a key supply route for the Redcoats. Much of the weapon assembly took place on March 4th, an unseasonably mild night according to troop diaries. A thin haze also shrouded the troops' activity from the nearby British. The suspicious British eventually realized Washington was setting the stage for another battle, but the night before the Brits went on the offensive, a severe tempest battered the city. Rain and wind lasted a day, forcing British General William Howe to hold in place. Washington worked through the storm, though, and by the time it lifted, Howe realized he was drastically outpowered. Instead of picking a fight with the battle-ready colonists, he told Washington to stand down while the British packed up and left Boston.
Delayed by high winds, the British fleet eventually evacuated Boston on March 17th, a day still celebrated in the city of Boston today.
After the Brits evacuated Boston, the war shifted south. Colonial successes, however, were still heavily influenced by the weather. Washington and his troops suffered several harsh losses around New York in 1776. By Christmas of that year, the now American army sat rather demoralized along the western banks of the Delaware River. Recognizing the need for a victory, Washington decided to cross the Delaware Christmas night to launch a surprise attack on Hessian troops fighting on behalf of the British. Crossing in a mix of rain, snow, and sleet, the American troops methodically crept towards the Hessians, who had hunkered down for the storm. Under cover of the storm, the Americans successfully won the ambush, took a few prisoners, and retreated back across the river for safety. Within a week, Washington was crossing back into New Jersey for a renewed attack at Trenton, and later in Princeton as well. These battles, initially aided by the storm, are now seen as a critical turning point in the Revolutionary War. The battles galvanized colonial support, shocked the British, and perhaps most importantly convinced critical allies like France that the Continental Army was a force to be reckoned with. Fast forward to October 1781 in Virginia. Battered and still somewhat bewildered by American successes, British General Cornwallis found himself trapped at Yorktown thanks to a French blockade. Under the cover of darkness, Cornwallis tried to sneak squadrons of troops across the James River to freedom. The first group successfully made it across the river, but then suddenly a severe thunderstorm blew in. Initially, the lightning illuminated the escape route, making it easier to flee, but the benefit of the lightning was soon outweighed by ferocious wind and rain, which destroyed the small vessels, shuttling the fleeing British troops. Some of the troops were lost as well. As Cornwallis described it later, quote, "At this critical moment, the weather, from being moderate and calm, changed to a most violent storm of wind and rain, and drove all the boats down the river," end quote. Just a day later, Cornwallis conceded defeat and began surrender negotiations, ending the Revolutionary War.
These are just a few of the many documented cases when weather played a pivotal role in the American Revolution. And had the weather been different, well, we may be celebrating a different holiday. Reporting near Boston for Weather or Not, I'm Michael Page.
But now back to the 21st century here in State College. How's the weather looking like this weekend? Are we going to see any relief coming up for next week?
Yes, we definitely are going to be seeing some relief for next week, but before that, we're going to just have to kind of deal with the heat and humidity for the weekend. 93 for the high on Saturday, still hot and sticky. Then 65 overnight Friday night. And then as we go into Saturday, could be seeing some isolated thunderstorms going into the afternoon. Some could be severe as well. So if you are outside, please seek shelter. Definitely, because it could become severe, especially if hail is in the area. Then 63 on Saturday, and then as we go into Sunday, very nice 84 degrees, because we're going to have a cold front move through, and that's going to give us some relief from that humidity. Finally, it's about time. Then going into the extended forecast, look at this. All around the mid to lower 80s for next week. Finally, some relief. Then as we wrap up the rest of the week, still dry and sunny as we go into next weekend. Right in time for Arts Fest. Similar to Michael Page's feature, we have some special guests to give you the answer to the Weather Whiz quiz.
What did Thomas Jefferson record the weather as on July 4th, 1776 in Philadelphia?
A, 76, partly cloudy. B, 84, mostly sunny. C, 93 and thunderstorms. D, 98 and hazy and humid.
And the answer is A.
Many people may not know, but Thomas Jefferson, a huge weather buff. In fact, he loved the weather so much he kept a thermometer in his pocket, checking the temperature throughout the day, and also the cloud cover. He kept a weather journal. This is his actual entry from July. You can see there on July 4th, 76 degrees. Pretty comfortable for Philadelphia.
But I mean, now the average for Philadelphia for right around this time of year is almost in the 90s. I mean, today they hit right around the mid 90s on July 4th. So it's crazy to think the difference between 1776 and today. But I mean, you have the urban heat island effect, so that always tampers with those temperatures.
Now what you guys have all been waiting for, we got special VIP access to the fireworks. We were up close, and we're now replaying the grand finale for you coming up in just a bit. But for now, that's all the time we have here on this special edition covering 4th Fest here at Weather or Not. I'm your host, Brandon Orr.
And I'm your forecaster, Jackie Lair, and have a great weekend.